Hello, it's Andrew
It's
Eborn here again with another edition of a very, very special time with Mike Read. How are you, Mike?
I'm pretty good, thank you. Yeah, very, very nice in this sunny weather.
It's glorious, it's absolutely glorious. And talking about sunny, yesterday we wandered the streets of London. Well, I wandered the streets of London, you in the comfort and cool of your fine residence, and we had a look at all things Bee Gees. Let's have a quick look at the footage. And we started off at 35 Portland Street. What was the importance of this? It's the IBC, wasn't it? The International Broadcasting Company, where it all started with the initial recordings. Talk us through some of the history.
Yeah, it became, of course, a very famous recording studio. Everybody recorded there. Chess Chandler bought it at one time. He managed Jimi Hendrix, of course. Slade recorded a lot of stuff there. The Bee Gees, so many artists down the years. This would have been home, and so many session musicians. But it had its roots back with a guy called Leonard Plugg back in 1931, who formed the Independent Broadcasting Company. And he, driving through France, heard various stations, and he went into a shop, I think, and somebody said, "Oh, since they've been talking about my shop on this local radio station, somebody had a generator, I've had far more customers." And he thought, "Oh, that's interesting. Now, the BBC don't take advertising." So he started up Radio Normandy. And he took advertising, and he also took money from record companies, who then said, "Well, actually, if you're going to promote these commodities and industry, why not do it with music?" So he took money before the days of payola. It was, "Yeah, okay, you pay me, we'll play your music." And they say that was where the term plugging came from, because he was Leonard Plugg. They reckon that was. I like to think so. I like to think that story is not apocryphal.
Never let stand in the way of a good story is what I always say, Mike.
Yeah, he was, Radio Normandy at some points during the 30s got bigger audiences than the BBC. So he did very, very well. And then, of course, came over here. The IBC became, when World War II started, the only station left there was Radio Luxembourg, RTL, which was commandeered by the Nazis. And a lot of French prisoners of war were put in there. And, of course, Radio Luxembourg was where they broadcast the Lord Haw-Haw. I say tapes from, but they were big pieces of shellac. You put the needle on the middle, and it played to the outside. And they broadcast those from RTL, Radio Luxembourg, and IBC became a recording studio here.
Oh, fantastic. And they've had some legendary artists that performed here and recorded stuff, including Lonnie Donegan and My Old Man's a Dustman.
Yeah, the desk in here was used for that. That was an outside broadcast. It was recorded live. But they used the desk from that recording and put it in here. And people always like that. You know, it's like when you record at Abbey Road, people always say, do you think John stood here? Yeah, I think Paul stood just about here. You all do it. And I'm sure people did it at IBC as well.
No, absolutely. I remember at Abbey Road, Mrs. Mill's piano, and how many people have tinkled on that?
Yeah, Abbey Road was famous for a lot of things. When the Beatles were doing an early album, they found a drum, and they thought, "Oh, we'll have that drum. It's a good sound." And they used it on "Don't Bother Me." And I think they nicked it from whichever orchestra had it. And years on, they said, "Let's get out the Don't Bother Me drum. That'll work well on this." So, yeah, but they had the time later and the indulgence to go in there for a while and book a studio out. Whereas back in the early days, the red light was on. You had 3 minutes to do your song, son, and that was it. Bang. So you've got a lot of intense passion and feeling in there.
Quite extraordinary. And what I loved as well about Lonnie Donegan and the fact that he did My Old Man's a Dustman is RJ was telling me that the Bee Gees recorded a cover version of that. Did you know about that?
No, I didn't know.
Which I was discussing it with your good chum Ian Freeman from that dynasty of glorious people, the Grades and the Belmont, and he was sort of telling me that he'd never heard of that either. So we have to dig out that recording of the Bee Gees doing My Old Man's a Dustman, because RJ promised me that he's got. It's rather fun. But that studio was also used. Tommy's Who, that was recorded there, wasn't it, as well? And the Kinks, You Really Got Me, and I think that was You Really Get Me. That was superb as well. So a really iconic place as we started our Bee Gees tour there, which was quite appropriate. We then wandered down south all the way of Portland Street, and we came across the Langham Hotel. Now, the Langham Hotel is where a lot of the Bee Gees did their interviews. What do you remember about the Langham?
Well, the Langham was a hotel. There's a plaque on there announcing that Oscar Wilde and Arthur Conan Doyle had lunch together there with their publisher, out of which came one of Conan Doyle's famous Sherlock Holmes stories, and Dorian Gray from Oscar Wilde from that lunch. So a plaque on the wall commemorates that. I think my chum Charles Brandreth instigated that plaque, and we have every year we celebrate Oscar Wilde's birthday at the Langham, which is rather nice. But the studio that was there that everyone recorded in is now the Polo Bar, that sort of area. I've done stuff in there. I've had my songs recorded in there and recorded in there as well. So yeah, the Bee Gees would have recorded in what was the bar. It was a dilapidated hotel at one point. The BBC took it over, and engineers who were working overnights could stay and stuff like that. It was a sort of rattling old rundown place with literally with rattling pipes, and they say a ghost or two. And then they made it more swish again and put it back to its original glory, which it is now. But yeah, lots and lots of history on there. You know, like Abbey Road, like IBC, you could whack a load of blue plaques on there for what happened. And in passing, I think maybe Leonard Plugg deserves a blue plaque at IBC for being a radio pioneer. So we'll definitely look into that.
No, and I think that's quite extraordinary. And the Langham itself has got one of the finest cocktail bars in Europe. It was voted fairly recently for the finest cocktail bar in Europe. And I'm sure several artists have come over from the BBC, which is right over the road, as we'll see. And I'm sure they've spent many a fine hour, not only doing interviews, because the Bee Gees used to do a lot of their interviews in the Langham Hotel, but also just relaxing. If they don't go to the BBC Club, which we'll also have a look at, they would pop over to Langham.
Yeah, it was an easy location. You see, right across the road from the BBC. So what they could do, and Cliff used to do it a lot as well, still does, you book a suite at the Langham for the day, for example. So you say the Bee Gees or Cliff want to book a suite for the day. Fine, okay, and they charge them whatever it was. And they set up camp in there with the cameras. So you could do, 6, 7, 8, 10 interviews a day. And you go, bang, we'll do one at 9, one at 10, one at 11, one at 12. And you do the interviews during the day. And it was very good because it's so close to the BBC that if someone had been doing something at the Beeb, all they had to do was pop across the road. You didn't have to say to Madonna, you've got to go to Sydenham or Dulwich, lovely places in themselves. But you go, I'm sorry, I'm not going out there. But you just, what about walking to this place across the road? Yeah, that's okay.
Yeah, no, absolutely stunning. And at the moment, it's closed, obviously, because of the virus. They're hoping to reopen. And a lot of places at the moment, we've been talking about the different concert places around, and people gradually easing back as to how we might do entertainment. And some of the things they've started, these drive-in things, similar to movies, where people will be in their cars, have a little bit of space, and then the artists will perform on stage, and people watch them within the confines of their car or just outside their car. What do you think of that?
Just outside what? Sorry, say again?
Just outside their car. So we're talking about a lot of places opening up now, and basically people trying to get concerts starting again. Because obviously with social distancing and stuff like that, it's very, very difficult. So one of the things they're looking at is exactly that, with people in their cars, would go to the old American drive-ins, and people would appear on stage, and you'll be able to see them, but in the basically a sort of social bubble, if you like. You have a marked area where you parked your car, and then you'll be able to see them on stage. So they're sort of gradually easing people in.
Yeah, they're doing that in Scotland. They've just announced a big concert in Scotland, a big driving concert in Scotland. But of course, you still need permission if you're doing it in places. I have suggested it for the radio recently. We start doing some road shows. But of course, you have to get planning permission from the council up front. You have to have facilities. You have to have security. There are so many things to take into account that if you do it in a tried and trusted spot, for example, I suggested if we did it at Longleat, you wouldn't have those problems. They'd just say, yeah, come in, there's a designated area, you're covered by our insurance, you can get 500 cars watching a road show, something like that. So it'll be the way forward for a while. Going to be a problem with theatres because they might have to offer actors and musicians less if they can only take 50% of the clientele. They're going to have, oh, there's a famous street. We used to be able to drive down there. I got clamped down there.
Oh, did you? When did you get clamped? We're outside the BBC now, BBC proper. When did you get clamped?
Yeah, just here. This was you could drive along this street. If I was late, I'd dump the car, run in, think I'll move it later, forgot about it, came out, and I think Moonpig or one of those card people had a card with me and my guitar on my back being clamped. So you could actually buy a card to send to people. Sorry, you've been clamped.
Oh,
and I was in front of it. Around the corner is George Orwell, down on the left here, who foresaw the current situation when he wrote 1984, which is quite interesting. yeah, it's an interesting thing that he's on the other side of the road. That's the entrance to Radio London now. And this was the back entrance to Radio 1 at one point. And we just passed around the corner there. Well, there's George Orwell. What would have been the old BBC library, which is now 5 Live. So 5 Live is where the old Radio 1 BBC library was as well. And you're heading down to Wogan House, and there it is. It used to be called Western House, and then they changed it for Tel. That's lovely. Wogan House. Radio 2 is situated there now, and a lot of people obviously go there to do interviews.
And fantastic. And tell us about some of your fond memories of Terry.
Well, we did Children in Need quite a few years because I was doing children's TV at the time with Sarah Green, so we'd often go on and do the sort of children's aspect of it. But he was delighted one morning when my old MG broke down on the Westway on the way in to do the breakfast show and created such a tailback that Terry got stuck in the tailback and was late for his own show. So he said, not only were you late for your own show, you made me late for mine.
You seem to have had a lot of problems with your car, whether it's being clamped outside the BBC or breaking down.
Yeah, I mean, everyone said, well, why don't you get a new one rather than these old MGs and stuff like that? But I just thought they were more interesting, really. You know, why don't you get a new reliable car? But no, they weren't as interesting. So we're heading back from Wogan House now. We'll be walking along here. I can see exactly where you're going. You're going to cross the road and Great Portland Street down to the left there. We're going back past George Orwell's statue, which is on the right. Interesting, they picked one statue. But on the ground, there are lots of names of countries and stuff like that in these plaques on the ground, which you won't see here close up. There's the entrance to Radio London, which was, to say, the back entrance at 1.2 Radio 1. All changed around there now. This was all pedestrianised a few years ago. And they have a lovely little cafe outside now where you can just sit, watch the world go by, and hopefully catch the eye of someone you want to impress, entertain, or plug your record to. There's the entrance to New Broadcasting House, which is just a sort of back bit of the BBC at one point, nothing special at all. And now they've got the cafe around here on the corner. And the piazza here, when they do live stuff, Foot 5 Live, that's where everybody plays. They play outside there in the piazza. And there's All Souls Church, always a great landmark for the BBC, All Souls Church, of course, and Broadcasting House, Old Broadcasting House on the right, which when the Prince Regent wanted the road to go straight up Regent Street to the park, there was a kink because the house that was standing on that site, the guy wouldn't sell, so they had to take the road round it, and only later did they build Broadcasting House there, I think about 3031.
Right, and talk to me about the Bee Gees and the BBC, because they must have played then not just on the radio, on several interviews, but also on several different shows.
Yeah, I mean, they were on the first ever chart at the BBC, September 1967. So they were there right at the beginning, and their music was played. I mean, all those early songs, the great early songs, "Get a Message to You," Massachusetts, Run to Me, beautiful songs, and they were played a lot by Radio 1. And then they came again with that Saturday Night Fever disco wave. So they reinvented themselves, sort of accidentally in a way, and came back massive hits in the States and here all over again, the second wave of Bee Gees stuff. And then the third wave in like the late 80s, early 90s just proves that, you can't keep on coming back unless you are very, very good. And they have one of the biggest song catalogs in the world. And as we were saying the other day with RJ, that Robin and the guys really saluted and tipped their hats to the people that played their records because they're a part of the team. You can have great music, you can make great records. It doesn't mean people are going to play them. You need a good manager, Robert Stigwood, who will come across later. But yeah, very, very important. And of course, when Robin split for a while with the Bee Gees, they'd walk in that door and say, the record company, and say, you must play the Bee Gees, but you mustn't play Robin's new single because it's sort of slightly fallen out. And Alan Freeman said, I will play it if it's good, love, and that's it. And he did. And Robin never forgot that and wrote that very beautiful song, Alan Freeman Days, about him, which is a very, very fitting and touching tribute.
And one of the things that, and it was partly successful because I think Stigwood was hoping that the Bee Gees would get back together, is that Juliet was a massive hit, #1 throughout Europe, and many children, both boys and girls, have derivations of either Juliet or Julius, but it was never released officially either in the UK or indeed in the US, because that was what Stigwood wanted to make sure that the Bee Gees got back together. So he was trying not to let Robin release stuff.
Yeah, it should have been a single. I remember playing it. I think we had Robin on Saturday Superstore with Juliet as well. It's a good song. I know RJ Gibb has done a version recently, which is also very, very good. But yeah, it's surprising. I always thought it was a single here. It was around the same time as a single called How Old Are You? They came out at a not dissimilar time. But yeah, I always imagined that was a single, but maybe it wasn't. And around that time, I remember Robin came on. We did a new pop quiz to celebrate the 30th anniversary of Top of the Pops. They brought back a special evening, Pants People, Top of the Pops, and we did a pop quiz. This was in '94, and Robin was on the panel. I remember, so that was great fun. I got him on the panel to come on for that special one-off. And Alan Freeman, I think Robin captained one team, and Alan Freeman captained the other team.
Oh, absolutely fantastic. Now, in front of us, we can see Pink Floyd. We've come over to obviously where Nick Mason and the others met at the Polytechnic. Tell us about that. Yeah,
they did their early gigs there. They were the ad-libs, sort of basically some of them Cambridge-based. Sid Barrett certainly was. And yeah, the Polytechnic, founded by Quentin Hogg. It's been an old cinema. I was in there last year for a thing they did with Quo. They put it back as a cinema. It was a very old cinema, Regent Street Poly. And yeah, Quo get their plaque on the wall. They played there in the early days. And it's nice to know, because, you know, you walk past these places, and unless there is a plaque or something telling you, then you'd never know. So it's a great talking point, and it's a great footprint of, you know, who we are, where we've been, where we're going. And you never know, sometimes these plaques inspire other people. You know, you can look at that and go, wow, I'd like to do that. I'd like to be, you know, form a group and have a blue plaque on the wall, have hit records. So it can be inspirational, but it's, and I think it's good for tourism as well. I don't think it's a bad thing for tourism, where, you know, more and more conglomerates and corporates are taking over, especially in Soho, and they're losing out to the people that can't afford the rate and rents and stuff like that. And all of the smaller shops are going, and the corporates are taking over. So, you know, at least we're fighting back with something with the blue plaques.
I know, absolutely. And it's also, as we mentioned, the Regent Street Cinema, which opened in 1848. And that was the birthplace of British cinema. And what I love, the first movie that they showed was a train coming towards the screen. And so many people, the news reports at the time, the Pathé news reports, showed all the people running out with absolute terror because they thought it was going to come. Now we come on to Margaret Street, 48 Margaret Street, which is the location of the Speakeasy Club. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, Speakeasy Club was one of the many clubs around London. I think, like the Cromwellian, the Bag of Nails, all these places, you know, Middle Earth. On what you wanted, I think the different clubs catered for different types of things. You get the hippies and the psychedelic people down at Middle Earth, maybe the more rocky people at the Bag of Nails. Or people just go and hang out. They know they wouldn't get bothered by fans that late at night, so you'd see a Beatle and a BG and a Stone and people like that. Thin Lizzy did their first ever gig here at the Speakeasy to get people down there from the industry, and the record company saying, "Come and see this band," which is what they did. So they did their first showcase there at the Speakeasy. So yeah, very important landmark. It's a problem, you know. Where do you? People always say about the blue plaques, you know. You could put them, most buildings in London have a history of some sort. They all do. If you look behind the doors, I mean, as you know, I'm writing a series of books on 1,000 Years of a London Street, and every single place, every single building in Piccadilly has something, you know, but you don't want to litter the place with blue plaques, otherwise it devalues them.
I know, it is quite extraordinary. And the other thing about the Speakeasy Club itself was the New York mining disaster in 1941. The promo film was filmed there famously.
Yes, it was. It was filmed at the Speakeasy because you were always looking for somewhere to shoot, and that was not really a video because they didn't have it. A promo film, they called them then. I mean, the Beatles did them down at Knoll in Kent. They did strawberry fields there, antics and jumping around. Now, either you had a bit of dosh, you could go and try and do something clever, or you could do a straightforward performance, which is what the Bee Gees did there. They did a straightforward singing performance with a camera pointing at them, which, you know, wouldn't have been that expensive to do. And at the time, of course, don't forget, they hadn't had a hit. They'd had Spicks and Specks out, which was sort of an early tester, but New York mining disaster was their first hit. So, you know, although Stigwood believed in them and they had a record label, it was that, well, probably let's see how it does. Let's shoot a promo film. And it was unusual. Not everybody shot promo films. But let's shoot a promo film down there and see how it goes. So I don't think it spent a lot of money on it, but great song, great song.
No, absolutely. And the interesting thing, the reason we popped in here, this is Nike on the corner of Regent Street and Oxford Street. Shops are just in the process of opening up. It's telling us to stay active. And you have a look, this is the height of the summer, when tourist season. This is the height of the middle of the day, when normally it would be packed. And it's quite extraordinary. These are just the shopkeepers there. And there's nobody. The place is empty.
And the only what?
And the place is empty. So the shopkeepers are all there. They've all opened up. That was Nike's store. And social distancing, keep your hands clean. But the reality is it's virtually deserted in central London at the moment.
Central London is. When you go out and about, if you go to Brixton or Camberwell or wherever, Hackney, you will find people on the street. You will find people in the cafes and out and about and doing things. But central London is very much a tourist place. The tourists won't come at the moment. Certainly the Americans won't come. And you've got this 2-week quarantine that's now kicked in. I think people are worried about being in London. And a lot of HQs are closed down. Of course, a lot of people are working from home, which is another thing. So not too much going on. And I think we'll probably relook at this afterwards. I think a few HQs in London may close down and start up some smaller hubs around the home counties, so you can go in there and work without spending 2 or 3 hours traveling every day. And they can pedestrianize London a little more. How that will work out, I don't know, whether that will increase the amount of tourism or not. But I think, tourists come here for particular reasons. That's why I think it's sad, what they've done to a lot of places, including Soho, because people want to go down and see Soho as it was. They want to, is this it? It's got the same shops as anywhere else. So, I think as soon as Berwick Street markets start going and the music side, the cosmopolitan side of it starts going, then it loses any atmosphere at all. I think we've got to be careful of that in London, that we don't lose the village atmosphere in various places.
No, you're absolutely right. And that was Live Nation's offices, which is why we went there, one of the biggest promoters in the world. And they do various events. And obviously that's been put on hold and they're changing that. And we're just coming up to one of the most famous theatres, the London Palladium, which has a rich history with the Bee Gees. Talk to us about that.
Well, it was Robin's last performance there. He really wasn't well. It was early 2012, but he was desperate to do it. We'd done a video. I directed a video for them down at Robin's house at Prebendal with the Soldiers, of course, the street guys who had so many hit albums. And they did a new version of Got to Get a Message to You. Robin joined them on. And I purloined an old American Jeep, and Robin and the guys drove it around the grounds, and we did a video. And I got the vicar from Robin's church across the road, where Robin now is, of course. And for that, the preacher walked with me and he smiled, said, come and walk with me. And Robin and the preacher are walking down, Robin and the vicar walking down the garden. And then we phased the vicar out, so it's just Robin. It was really good. And then they performed it at the Palladium and some other songs. And Robin, was determined to be there. And he went on stage and performed, and that was his last ever performance at the Palladium.
And before that, obviously, the Bee Gees themselves very famously had a concert in 1973, and it was the place where they held the press conference when they announced the launch of Saturday Night Fever, and also it's the world musical premiere took place at the London Palladium here on Argyle Street. So rich history with the Bee Gees, and in fact with many artists. Over the years, it was the home of entertainment, wasn't it?
Oh, massive. The Sunday night on the Palladium was always massive. And you can't resist the temptation. I hosted Jerry Lee Lewis' 80th birthday party there about 3 years ago. And it was a Sunday night, and I said to the guy backstage, could you play the theme when I go out? Da, 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 da. And I can go out and go, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. Welcome to Sunday night at London Palladium. I had to do it. I just had to do it. I couldn't help myself. But no, they did the 73 concert there, the Bee Gees, and played some of my favorite tracks, Morning in My Life, which I love. I Could See Nobody. I Started a Joke, which Robin sang so beautifully. Massachusetts, they did on that occasion as well. And of course, they appeared there so many times. And to announce Saturday Night Fever was interesting because, of course, they wrote the songs. The songs were written without them seeing the film, which is very unusual.
It is quite unusual. In front of us, we've got Liberty, which is one of the most famous retail shops in the world, with this fantastic wooden beamed exterior. Now, this was set up a long time ago, 1875, by Arthur Lazenby Liberty, who borrowed £2,000 from his father to set up this store. And it is, people, tourists from all over the world flock to Liberty's to buy everything. It's a fantastic store. But again, it's open. And the sad thing is, nobody's coming along yet.
Yeah, I think they will. It'll be gradual. They normally have a wonderful flower cellar at the door. So as you walk in, it's absolutely full of flowers there. And I think the ship's timbers they use, I think the length of it, that was shorter to start with. I think the length is the same length of the ship. Just across the road there, down to the left, you can see that was Decca HQ in London. They were also an Albert Embankment, but that's where all the stars would have been. Next door to Great Marlborough Street Court, where the Stones and what have you, there's the entrance to the Palladium, the back door. Yeah, where the Stones would have gone to face their bus charges, Who Will Break a Butterfly on a Wheel, as Rees Mogg wrote when he was editor of the Times. So yeah, so very famous. And just on the left here, as we're going down Carnaby Street, there was a pub that was dedicated to Nipper the HMV dog. So the area absolutely full of history, and the old pub we'll talk about in a while. Shakespeare's Head coming up on the right there, where I saw Tommy Cooper once having a drink. He didn't see me though. But here we are, the famous Carnaby Street.
No, glorious. And this was the heart of fashion, wasn't it, in the 60s and 70s? And we're coming down to John Stephen, who was a tailor there. He called himself the king of Carnaby Street, if you like. Because Barry famously used to go there a lot. Robin used to go there a lot. And Maurice as well, to get their different clothes. Because it was as much about the fashion as the music, wasn't it, when they were starting?
Yes, it was. I mean, take 6, John Stephen. The best thing is to get in there first and call yourself the king of Carnaby Street before anybody else does. There was a lovely guy called Colin who had long ginger hair, who was there forever on one of the side streets, and he'd make whatever he wanted. He wore loon pants, those big, wide loon pants with inlets in them, and he made me a Union Jack jacket. He was brilliant. He was very much a part of the street. And down at the far end on the right is where John Arden had his office. He was famously, for many reasons, a manager who looked after the small faces. So there is a green Westminster plaque down there at the right on the end. And also at number 50, there was a very famous club in the 50s where a lot of people formed, Lord Kitchener, people like that. It was very much a Jamaican calypso club. It has a very checkered past as well. A lot of things happened there. But the plaque on the wall to the small face is very close to that. And then over to the right here, we're in Carnaby Street now. To the right is Kingley Street, where the Bag of Nails is, where Hendrix initially played, and where Paul McCartney met Linda Eastman. But I know that Barry actually won for walking down Carnaby Street the Best Dressed Man Award, didn't he?
Yes, that's absolutely right. And John Stephen, who was at number 5, he moved from just around the corner because his original premises got burnt down. We're not quite sure why, whether he needed the money or something terrible happened. But this shows us where we are at the moment. And you are here. So it just proves that sort of thing. It's all very good.
We're very close to where William Blake was born, of course. There's not a blue plaque, but a large plaque on a building there that says William Blake was born near this site. That's in Brook Street.
And every one of these streets tells a tale, doesn't it? Just off Carnaby Street, you have all the different little shops and restaurants and so on and so forth. We're at number 5 now, and this is John Stephen's place. And John, he called himself the king of Carnaby Street. The £1 million mod, I think was his other name. And he's famously known as Carnaby Street is my creation. I feel about it the same way as Michelangelo felt about the beautiful statues that he created. So I think, as you say, you claim it. You say, I created it. And then who cares as long as don't let the truth stand in the way of a good story. That's what we all say.
Yeah, and it's good for tourism. It's all good for tourism. And down at the end of the street, if you go down to the end of Carnaby Street, turn left, that was where, we're heading towards the left. You turn left, and that's where Canaletto lived. And there is a very old plaque, an LCC plaque, so early part of the 1900s to Canaletto. And there is someone we know. Look at that mean, moody man. My goodness me, look at that. Look, goodness me. You look as they're auditioning for a moody film.
And it's very moody. I think the reason I'm so moody, maybe, is because it was swelteringly hot. And I think I was on the street for about 6 hours yesterday. It was glorious.
You certainly lost weight since IBC about 15 minutes ago.
I think that's probably right. I think half of me's left on the street in Carnaby Street. I am half the man I used to be, which is always a thrill. But Carnaby Street, it oozes history, doesn't it? I mean, the people who've been there, the home of the mods, all of that sort of stuff. Talk to me about some of the other characters who would have spent their time on Carnaby Street.
Well, certainly, I mean, everyone was photographed on it. Every band, certainly in the mod Renaissance in like late 70s, early 80s, all the bands wanted to be seen in Carnaby Street. And there are quite a few mod shops there now. So it has become a little mod centre where you can go and buy Renaissance mod clothes. And there are a few shops still there that do that. And the New Musical Express was on the street here for a while as well. That, of course, was founded in 1952 in Denmark Street. But latterly, they moved over here and were in Carnaby Street. It's an address that a lot of people wanted to be associated with at the time. I mean, now, of course, it's tourism, but at the time, it was a hip, cool place to be, like the King's Road. Now people are going, hey, let's go and see Carnaby Street, or go see the King's Road. But at the time, it was happening. There was the places where people wanted to be seen and wanted to look cool. So it was great. It was again great for tourism. Great for people coming here, swinging London. And we had a great image at the time, thanks to the massive British invasion of music, indeed thanks to the pirate radio stations, who opened the doors for our music scene, for publishers, writers, singers, and then they all burst into America. So, of course, we were hip and happening, and Carnaby Street was right in the centre of that.
And as we see, and the great thing about just wandering around London, there's history upon history right next door to each other, isn't there? Turn a different corner, and there's another opportunity to, as you say, about blue plugs, but also to remember the rich history that we have within London, all within walking distance.
Yeah, absolutely right. I mean, the number of times I've been with people in London or around the country, and they've turned to me, hopefully in a nice way, and said, it's like being the tourist guide. How do you know that happened there? How do you know? But I think if you're interested, then you do. There we are, Newburgh Street now, poking down there. So many little offshoots of Carnaby Street that it was going down, not just the street itself. The old famous White Horse there. There's so many famous hotels called the White Horse. One on Piccadilly, of course, very, very famous. Highwaymen used to go there and have a drink before going out and robbing people. So there we are. There's the old White Horse. There is so much history, and I hope we don't lose it. And I hope they're not allowed to pull too much down. But you know what it is, Andrew. You turn a corner these days. You think, why is it different? You think, God, that's gone. Where did that go? And suddenly something flattened, and there's going to be nothing terribly attractive in its place. And I really feel that they should say to the architects, if you take something down, I don't mind if it does cost more. You put something up that is in keeping with the rest of the street, in size, dimension, quality, and brickwork, or whatever it is.
And that's certainly true. You had some classic places, and you've written extensively about that in your book, about Tin Pan Alley. I mean, talk about that just as we're going around the streets. Tin Pan Alley and the history of that.
Was it what? Sorry.
So Tin Pan Alley, we were saying the same sort of way that classic places within London, which we don't want to lose to developers, but the rich.
Yeah, no, I mean, it started, just before the First World War. A few publishers moved in. Lawrence Wright moved in, who wrote as Horatio Nichols, 1908, and then gradually more moved in. It became the go-to street, which makes sense, really. For all the publishers and writers to be in one street. It's a bit like David Land, who managed Tim Rice and Andrew Lloyd Webber, used to say, if there's room for one hamburger joint on the block, room for two or three, because people say, oh, let's go down to so-and-so street for our hamburgers. Same with Carnaby Street. They're all clothes shops, or they were all clothes shops, but that didn't matter. People could go and browse, and they'd all make money, and it worked. And I think that's often the case, and it certainly was with Denmark Street. Where do you go to see a music publisher? Denmark Street. Where do you go for a songwriter? Denmark Street. Are you having a relationship with her, Andrew?
I think what I was interested in, and I'm not even going to say not yet, because my wife wouldn't allow that at all. Quite right too. But what was interesting, look, they're getting the pubs ready. So she's the wonderful sign writer, putting on the gold paint ready to open up this fantastic pub here, which will be opening up. And on July the 4th, they're talking about everything's going to be Independence Day, and lots of the pubs and various places are going to open up. Everybody's socially distancing. They're taking the restrictions down from 2 meters to where it's not possible to do 2, just to do 1. And so it's interesting seeing these places getting ready. But in spite of the fact that some are already open, I was quite shocked just to see how empty it is. And this is the height of the tourist season. People can socially distance, and people can go out in a sort of sensible way and come and have a look at these shops. We're coming on to Regent Street now.
Well, you know where they've all gone, don't you?
I'm sorry?
They've all gone to Bournemouth in Camber Sands.
Oh, I saw that. Extraordinary, isn't it?
I mean, nobody in London, thousands of people on the beach all cheek by jowl. I find it extraordinary.
Well,
absolutely.
Yeah. You're absolutely. I mean, look at this. This is Regent Street on the same day as there's this report about everybody out on the beach. There's nobody in the heart of London.
I think everyone thinks it's an ongoing holiday, you know, really. I'm sure they do. I mean, those are extraordinary scenes. I read a piece this morning saying that Golden Beach or Golden... Sorry, St. Peter, I forgot the meter. You know, extraordinary. Yeah, nobody around in central London. But as I say, in all the satellite towns, the dormitory towns, the suburbs, and any other towns around the country, I'll bet they'll all be out enjoying the sunshine. They certainly are. You've obviously attracted all the women here, trying to lure people into Hamleys, the best toy store in London. I love Hamleys, absolutely wonderful.
Hamleys is stunning, isn't it? And if you have a look here, again, this would be polluted. Lots of people would be throbbing with people. Look at this. It's completely empty. And the reason we went in here on that day is this was the 25th of June, which was exactly 11 years to the day that we lost Michael Jackson. And Michael Jackson used to close down Hamleys, and he would have his own private view because he loved toys, he loved magic, and so on and so forth. And the reason we had a quick look at Hamleys is as a sort of tribute to him, if you like, but also to recognize just how uncrowded London is. When we talk about all the beaches being really, really crowded, London itself is just empty.
Yeah, now's the time to do filming, isn't it? I mean, you know, if you're filming a period piece, if you're doing a Poirot or something, and now's the time to get out and do it when there's nobody around. I often wonder how they clear the streets and put in old automobiles and stuff like that. And have you noticed in all those old films, all the cars and railway engines are immaculate. They're polished to a high gleam. And back in the day, they wouldn't have been because the roads were dusty, dirty. It was the realism manager of that. I said, no, dirty the car up a little bit. But there's a blue plaque. I can't quite see who it is from here, but we've whizzed past it. I'm not quite sure. The side of a lorry, very good.
There you go. It's a bit of an eyesight.
That looks like that. Is that Canaletto? I don't know.
I think there is certainly Canaletto. There's so many here. And I think what it is, Mozart also was here for a while, wasn't he? A lot of people forget that Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart, he lived here. And so many people would come over and spend some time in London. And this is why you can have so many opportunities just to walk the streets that they walked and to experience what they...
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, Mozart was supplied definitely to Mozart in what would have been Cubitt Town, and one down in St James's as well. And of course, one next door to Handel. It was Hendrix and Handel lived next door to each other. So yeah, I plotted the maplats for about 4 or 5 counties because somebody said, oh, you should do an app. So I worked for ages plotting them so you'd have an app for each county. So it was instructive. People could go places and have a look and check it out, and but then trying to find someone to do the app. So you put in a lot of work. It's very, very difficult, this, but it's you know, I was planning to do the whole country.
And that would be fantastic because you can walk around with your phone. So we've been here many times. This is on Conduit Street. This is the Polo Lounge at a fantastic hotel called the Westbury, and many clients would come in here. I remember Charlie Sheen. We had a good meeting with Charlie Sheen, but many other stars would come into London. It's right very close to all the major theatres. So this is the Westbury Hotel. Do you have experience with the Westbury, Mike? Have you been here a few times?
Yes, I have. I first went there when I was at college. A guy was at college with his parents were over from America, and I stayed there. And I remember it was where the guards come out early in the morning and take the horses to exercise. And I looked out of the window, and there was nothing else in the street about 200 cavalry on horses, and I thought, wow, I always remember that. It really made a great impression on me. It was basically, not so much now maybe, it was a hotel where the Americans stayed. It was very much the go-to hotel for Americans, and it was where I interviewed Buddy Holly's manager. So I went there and had tea with him and his wife, and did the interview there as well. So that was an interesting for me. So yeah, I've done quite a lot. After Jerry Lee Lewis's thing at the Palladium, I went down there for a nightcap with Robert Plant to talk about the blues and stuff like that. So yes, over the years, done a few things in the Westbury.
Oh, fantastic. And Jerry Lee Lewis, I remember coming along to that side because we had his sister, Linda Lee Lewis as well. Did you meet Linda? She's a fantastic performer in her own right, and she performed at the concert as well, at his farewell concert.
That's right, yeah. Linda Gale Lewis, also a good performer. He was very unlikely, Jerry Lee Lewis, because he didn't look like a pop star. He was a great pianist, a bit like Gene Vincent. He was loved by the guys more than the girls. The girls loved Cliff, they loved Elvis, and things like that. But the guys were very much, Gene Vincent and Jerry Lee Lewis weren't pin-ups as such, but they were great musicians. And the guys who sort of turned away, well, we don't want to worship Elvis and Cliff because they're squeaky clean, good-looking boys. And the general run-of-the-mill guys could actually go, yeah, we like Jerry Lee Lewis and Gene Vincent. They're boys singers. So they were very much, of that ilk. The guys would turn up to support people like that.
Oh, fantastic. And what about you? Did you have, you dealt with everybody throughout the years. Who would your favourites be? If you had to do a Mike Read top list, what would you put on your little iPod? What would go on there?
Be a top 1,000, I think. Very difficult, very, very difficult picking just a few. As my favourite singer, I would have Scott Walker. I just think he's the most fantastic singer. I love Scott Walker, so he would definitely be there as my favourite singer. But the others, they change. My single of all time is Survival by Yes. So yeah, we're coming down on the left here, past the Queen's birthplace. We're now a Chinese restaurant. We're heading down towards Berkeley Square there, but on the left, the Culpeppers over on the right there, lovely place. But on the left is where the Queen was born, in Bruton Street, before they moved around the corner. The family moved around the corner between the mid-20s and mid-30s to 145 Piccadilly, which was where they lived until they moved into Buckingham Palace after the abdication. So yeah, she was born just here on the other side of the road to this. Where the plaque is, fortunately, it's now a designated smoking area for a Chinese restaurant. So which is quite interesting. Yeah, this is Culpeppers on the right here, and coming down into Berkeley Square. They've estimated these trees now in Berkeley, as Jack Barkley. They've estimated these trees at prices. They've actually costed them like houses, and they reckon the big plane trees in Berkeley Square are worth like 750,000, £1 million, 1.25. So they all now have a value. There's Morton's up in the top corner there, very, very good. And the plaque is covered now. There's a one philanthropist who's got a plaque up in the corner, and Morton's is next to it. But yeah, these plane trees, Andrew, now have a value. It's amazing, isn't it?
I find that quite a good. So how do they put that value on it? And if somebody chops one down, is that the fine they have to pay?
I don't know, but one of the most valuable ones is the one in Cheapside that's been there for hundreds of years. And that's, I don't know, worth 2 or 3 million or something now. How do you put that on a tree? I really don't know. I mean, you put a plaque, this tree is worth 3 million, and someone will come and dig it up overnight and take it away, probably. But Berkeley Square, of course, was famous over the years. They've stopped it now for the Berkeley Square Ball, which I love. I love the Berkeley Square Ball. It was just absolutely wonderful. Wonderful occasion.
It's wonderful. We're right outside Morton's now, and many a happy memory at Morton's. Tell me about that and about the Bee Gees in particular at Morton's.
Yeah, I mean, everyone used to go to Morton's. It was one of those places you could have lunch upstairs, or you could sit downstairs in the bar and hang out in the evening. Errol Brown from Hot Clip was always in there. He was in there a lot. My chum Susan George, often in there. Often see Susan in there. So yeah, it was a go-to place where people, by and large, could be okay. I know sometimes, people knew where that's where people go, so they'd go in and maybe be a bit of a nuisance. But generally, it was well policed. These places were, and if anyone was a problem, they were out. So it was somewhere people could go and be comfortable, I think, yeah.
And fantastic. And the Nightingale singing on Berkeley Square, that famous song. What's the history of that? And have you ever heard a nightingale sing on Berkeley Square?
A nightingale. We had nightingales when I was a kid in the cedar trees at the end of the garden, and I remember it not being exactly a pretty sound, to be honest. I always imagined a nightingale, because of the name of the bird, would be an attractive. I don't remember it as being that attractive. It was written in France, I think, so not in England. It was a nostalgic thing written by two guys in France, and it was Jane Birkin's mother who first sang it. She was the first person. I mean, of course, much covered now, much covered. I mean, and a lovely London song. There are some great London songs. London by Night that Carol Coates wrote, I think is wonderful. Frank Sinatra covered that. Also Berkeley Square as well. And it just touches the places without being overt, you know, without being too much. And I just think it's a wonderful song. But you know, like so many songs written abroad when you're thinking of home, you capture the nostalgia because you're not right there on the spot. You're imagining it. And I think that's one of the things with writing songs, the imagination.
Oh, absolutely. And we're walking along here with lots of the other famous places, some of the famous clubs like Annabelle's and so on and so forth. So a lot of things happen around Berkeley Square. Give me some of the highlights of some of the clubs around Berkeley Square itself.
Well, down at the bottom of the square was the Astor Club, which had stairs going down. There's George Canning's plaque just coming up on the right there. This is number 50, where Robin, I know, used to go. There's George Canning. Yeah, that's George Canning's plaque. He was a famous Labour politician, of course. And yeah, Robin next door used to go there looking for books, apparently. In the rarefied atmosphere of upstairs, he would go and look at books in there. Quite often, you know, some of these places behind closed doors, you wouldn't know what they were unless you were on the inside, unless you had some insider knowledge. I know book places like that where there's a seemingly sort of bland door and you push a button and they say, oh yes, come in. There's some rare stuff in there. So I think Robin used to haunt number 50 next door to George Canning. The Astor Club was over on the left. If you carry straight on down there to the right, you hit Gordon Selby's plaque. He's down there on the right, and the road bends round a bit towards Curzon Street. But I think you're probably going to take a dip before Curzon Street, aren't you? I think you're looking back up Berkeley Square now towards where the Connaught is, of course, round the corner on the left there, where you always had to wear a tie in the Connaught. I'm not sure it's quite so strict now, but the Connaught was, if you didn't have a tie, you didn't come in. A bit like Brown's in Albemarle Street. If you didn't have a tie, you didn't come in. The RAF Club the same. But we can lend you one, sir. Do I have a choice? No, sir, we'll just give you one. Thank you very much. Oh, but it's horrible. Well, that'll teach you, sir, won't it?
Well, they do have some.
So here we are, we're in Charles Street. We're around the corner in Charles Street, aren't we?
Yes, that's right. Absolutely right. And we walked along here, and then we realised as we walked along that we should go back to number 1, because the numbering, we talk about the numbering on, we'll come back to number 1 in a bit, but the numbering in London streets, it changed so much, didn't it? And you'll often find it by number 1 over to, and then jump over to number 74. And it's extraordinary. Tell us about why the numbering in London streets is so strange.
I suppose it was a postal thing, really. I mean, at one point, of course, houses didn't have numbers, and then some streets started in the 1700s to have numbers, and then they renumbered as buildings became several buildings. So you look at a place now and you can say, well, what's that? That's 161 to 189. But of course, back in the day, that might have been, 20 tenements. And now it's one big office block. So that's the reason there. But number 1 here was the home of Tim Rice and Andrew Lloyd Webber, their first office, where David Land and Sefton Myers ran New Ventures. Sefton, the father of Judy Zook, of course, who had a hit with Stay With Me Till Dawn. But Sefton and David worked out of there with Tim and Andrew. That was their very, very first office. And the pub on the corner used to have the lengthy name of, something like I Am the Only Running Footman, and it's now been shortened to the Footman. Obviously, they're cheapskates. They don't want to paint the long sign anymore. So
I think
it's now become
the Brexit version. It's the Brexit version of the name, isn't it? You lock off all the extra bits. But quite glorious. But yes, we're walking our way back to number 1, which is that corner. It's that grey building, as you say, which is on the corner of Berkeley Square. And tell us a bit about the history and the rich history of number 1 and who was there and the sort of things that happen as we look and go through the door. Here we are.
Well, Sefton Myers and David Land gave Tim and Andrew a £200 advance each. I think Tim spent his £200 on Madame Tussauds shares because he was trying to impress somebody who worked there. I think the shares were 14 shillings each, and I think he bought loads of shares to try and impress the girl. It didn't work, of course. So yeah, that's where they worked out of. Tim and Andrew worked out of the store. A lot of artists came in and out of here. I remember so many people going in and out of there and wanting to work, because Tim and Andrew hadn't really made it then. When they brought out Jesus Christ Superstar here. Well, their first musical was called The Likes of Us, about Dr. Bernardo. Then Joseph, which was a 20-minute piece for Collett Court, St. Paul's Prep School. Then Jesus Christ Superstar. But over here, no one wanted to know. And then it became a big hit in the States. And then suddenly over here, everyone did want to know. And Daily Express, so proud of our two boys, Jim Price and Andrew Lloyd Webster, said the Daily Express. Our two English boys, Jim Price and Andrew Lloyd Webster, have done very well in America. I love it. And of course, on the other side of the road to that and down a bit is the English-speaking Union, where I've spoken in English. So that's down on the other side as well.
And as we say, every corner of London has got a different tale to tell, hasn't it? We were just looking inside the Footman there. That will be opening up in the next few days on July the 4th on Independence Day. But all the pubs in London, and some of them are dating back a very long time. What do you know about pubs in London, Mike?
Well, I mean, they're great. They've always been a part of London life, pubs. I mean, and it's amazing in the city, you know, some of the old Victorian pubs have survived on a corner where office blocks all around them. Somehow they've let our pubs survive, which is rather nice. They've always been gathering points. Maybe now, I mean, city pubs probably more popular. Country pubs, they have to do food now. It used to be you went to have a drink, but you can't do that anymore because you're driving to a country pub. You've got to do food. So they've got to be gastro pubs now. But in London, you can still have beer, and you can see the crowds of people outside. You know, on a summer's evening, they'll be spread to the pavement. So it's not just the inside space. They'll all be outside drinking and talking. A great meeting place for people after work. Always been a London institution, the pubs. Which is rather good. I mean, I think it's a nice thing, isn't it? It's a place for people to go and gather. I mean, I think that's why Lions, people like that, you know, started the Lions Corner House, because it was somewhere to go just to have a tea and a sandwich. Before that, you had to go and have a proper lunch or a proper dinner. And they worked out that not everybody in the city wanted to have a big lunch or a big dinner, but they wanted a quick sandwich and a soup. And that really, really worked for them. And very, very clever. I think you've got to make it work. You've got to make the city work for you as well as working for the city. And the vicar at St Mary's in Cheapside did that. He realised there were a lot of people wandering around at lunchtime. They brought sandwiches, brought a flask of something. So he started lunchtime sessions, and he'd invite Laurence Olivier. He'd invite famous people down there. He'd invite top politicians down there. He'd invite top actresses. Joyce Grenfell was a favourite. And he'd had two pulpits. He'd be in one, and they'd be chatting generally, a little bit about religion, but general things. So people would pack in there at lunchtime. They'd bring their lunches, they'd bring their vacuum flask, and they'd be in there, and they'd be listening to Laurence Olivier free. It was wonderful. So I think you've got to sometimes tailor your industry, whatever it is, your cafe, your church, whatever it is, to what is going on, and be aware of that, and not expect to stand still, because like the language, it's a moving feature.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. And as we walk along here, we're on our way to Brook Street and the home of RSO, the Robert Stigwood organisation. Talk to me about management in those days and why it was so important for artists who want to get on to have a manager.
Well, that was the way the structure was set up then. You know, you approach somebody to get a publishing deal or to get a recording deal or to get a manager. And the manager was someone that always said he was the one that could get you the recording deal. It seemed pretty magical at the time. Being on television was magical. You know, singers, groups go, how do I get from here to there? How do I do that? And there was a structure, and you generally had to go to a manager. And there were local managers who happened to be the bloke with the van that said, I'll manage you boys, but didn't really have much of a clue. And then there were the big London managers who probably had too much of a clue and maybe ripped people off. But you had to make a decision. If you wanted to make it, you probably had to sign something along the line. And your parents warned you about signing it. But there were good managers, bad managers, dodgy managers, managers with stables of people. that gave them all, great names, stables of lookalikes and things like that. So, yeah, you had to decide who to sign with. And the Bee Gees were lucky, to get Robert Stigwood, because he saw something in them and believed in them. And that was in the day when managers and record companies believed in an artist. They put money behind that and time behind them and work behind them and love and passion, which doesn't happen now. If you don't do it straight away, you're out. If you don't take a fully marketed product to the record company, even then they're probably going to go, what? I don't know, mate. Where are we now? J. Arthur Rank.
Right,
yeah,
right.
J. Arthur Rank, as the Bonzo said, J. Arthur Rank on gong. Yeah, he was the founder of the Rank organization, of course. And then again, linking in with music, the Rank Starlets, were all out at Ealing, working Rank Studios, and also sometimes, had hit records as well. They'd moved from film into having hit songs. They realized the power of having a hit song would help a film star, or actually interpolating a pop star into a film, as they did with Cliff, as they did with Adam Faith and people like that, Billy Fury, put the pop stars in a film. So that's when the film industry and the music industry started working together. And people like the Aberbach brothers, who started Hill and Range, Elvis Publishing, they realized that no one was picking up the money from the films, from the music in films in the late 30s. They spotted that and made a killing, absolute killing. So it's keeping your eye on the ball and seeing which way things are going.
Absolutely. I mean, as we talk about new technology and different ways of extracting money from copyright, I think it's very important that people appreciate there are all these different ways. And as a lawyer, trying to help people navigate the changing face. We talk about holograms, as you know, we're very heavily involved in hologram. We have a Mike Read hologram, don't we? You travel the world whilst you're in your slippers.
I saw that hologram recently. It was taken 2 years ago, and he hasn't aged at all.
That's the Dorian Gray. Maybe that's what we should do. Have the holograms aging. That'd be rather fun. But it's a great way of bringing.
Hologram of Dorian Gray. That would be great. A hologram of Dorian Gray. I like that.
But it's a great way of letting people enjoy artists at their peak, at the best performance. They will give the best performance ever as a hologram, and people won't be able to tell the difference.
Yeah, no, absolutely right. I gave my best performance. I peaked 2 years ago when you hologrammed me, but I know that I'll be there and ever youthful.
Yeah, always a joy. But a changing music industry. I mean, how did Robert discover the Bee Gees?
I don't know how they first got together. Also, we know how Epstein did. When the guy walked into NEMS and asked for My Bonnie by the Beatles, and went down to the cabin, and they gave him a hard time, and with their sense of humor, and he saw something in them. I think you've got to have somebody like that. You can kick against it in the end. You can initially want them and go, this guy's done well for us, and you can have that bit of, or do we need them anymore? It's a bit the Pied Piper syndrome, I always think, where the Pied Piper of Hamelin offered the mayor of Hamelin offered the Pied Piper 1,000 guilders to rid the town of rats, which he did. And afterwards he went for his money, and the mayor said, 1,000 guilders? Oh, the rats have gone now. Take 50. You didn't have 50 before. Have 50 now. And it's a bit like that. It's the great promise. And it was, hang on, you promised this. Yeah, but you're stars now, boys. And the same on the other foot, with the, well, do we need you anymore, Mr. Manager? You've done your job, you've earned your money, you can clear off now. So there's a lot of falling out going on as well. We're in Grosvenor Square, hurrah!
And Grosvenor
Square.
Look,
who's that?
I've no idea who that is. The Grosvenor Square, the wonderful thing. The wonderful thing about Grosvenor Square, this is where many fantastic places around it. The American Embassy used to be here before it moved.
That's right. It's in Battersea now. A pretty ugly-looking building, I would say, the one in Battersea. The one here, much better. Always heavily guarded on every street, back street, side street. Very, very heavily guarded American Embassy. I don't know what it's going to be now. I remember in Portland Place, where they took the Chinese embassy down, they spent ages taking out every little bit of wiring in the entire place. So I'm sure there will be an awful lot that has to be dismantled in secret in there. But yeah, that's where the American Embassy was, in Grosvenor Square. And we're heading down, obviously, towards the east end of Grosvenor Square now, the American Embassy up there behind us. And of course, saying, every house will have a history here. You look into every house behind every door. And they always look pretty innocuous on the outside. You go inside, and a lot of these places, as you know, are absolutely wonderful.
Oh, stunning, fantastic high ceilings, lots of history oozes from every possible corner, which is glorious. And we have Winfield House just by us in Regent's Park, where it's the home of the American ambassador, where the president of America will come and stay. So we often see all the helicopters and so on and so forth as people go and visit. And we've been inside there. It's coming up to American Independence Day, which is going to be particularly significant for us over here in the UK as well, as they ease all those restrictions. But and we have Canada Day as well before that on July the 1st. There's a rich history in Trafalgar Square, where the boys, the Bee Gees, had played in Trafalgar Square as well.
That's right. Yes, absolutely right. And you've just gone past the Caprice. You could have popped in and had a quick bite. But the American ambassador, of course, was JFK's father, Joe Kennedy, was the ambassador for the court of St. James before the Second World War. Desperately wanted the job, had all the press in his pocket in the States, and he went to the president to say, look, I really want this job. But he was aware of Joe Kennedy's power. And the president said, Joe, he said, you want this job? And he said, yes, I do, Mr. President. He said, drop your trousers, Joe. Mr. President, drop your trousers. And he made him stand there with his trousers around his ankles, apparently for 5 minutes, just to prove that he wasn't infallible and he was human. Then gave him the job. So he came over here for 2 years. And JFK and his sister, Kit Kennedy, had a wonderful time in London going around the clubs. JFK, can you imagine a young boy, 18, 19, 20 years old? Fabulous time. But Joe Kennedy was all for appeasement with Hitler, and Churchill did not like him and got him sent back home.
Oh, brilliant stuff. And we love all of that. I mean, so many people obviously came to London at different stages of their lives. I think you can probably put a plaque to anybody who's visited anywhere, depending on how many, if you limit it to sort of one night here at this particular hotel, another night over here, because I think there's one, even on beachfronts, they put some extraordinary places for plaques, don't they? I remember hearing, I think you told me about the most unusual place that they put a plaque.
Most unusual what? Sorry.
Most unusual place where they put a plaque. I think somebody was having a bag of chips on a bench at a seaside resort once.
Yeah, that was Jimi Hendrix. I mean, I did rail against that at a literary function a while back, and say to put up a plaque saying Jimi Hendrix ate fish and chips here, and unless it's just a joke, it is a nonsense. It devalues the real plaques if you start doing that. I found out a little bit. Somebody said the other day with the Monster Raving Loony Party and the plaque for Lord Such, and I said, well, okay, he was a character, and I played in the Savages a couple of times. He was a great guy, but I would question a blue plaque, when you've got blue plaques to some quite serious players. Alexander Fleming, who saved millions and millions and millions of lives. I know you have to balance it with the different genres, but there are some that I certainly question. And the bag of chips one, definitely. And of course, they do that famous Mookie plaque, on the 17th of November, 1843, nothing happened here.
Which I do love. I love this sort of misrepresentation in different signs and things like that. I remember in the Shaftesbury Avenue, one particular theatre had an enormous poster of Tom Cruise with the name Tom Cruise, and in tiny letters, will not be appearing in this production. I thought it's
I know. So, as a lawyer, that's probably misrepresentation, I think, isn't it?
I think it probably is misled a few people, but I think most people saw through the joke anyway. We're approaching now. Talk us through.
Yes, we're coming up to Robert Stigwood's office. This is now owned. I was here a few weeks ago. I got a call from Tim Rice saying, Miggers, have you seen the disgraceful state of the plaque? And I'm very surprised. I've never seen a plaque in this condition before. So I'm very surprised. It's a green plaque. It's a Westminster plaque. It's put up by the Heritage Foundation. They're normally very consistent with their plaque quality because Robin and myself were president and vice president. You can't quite see here. It may be just. But it is very, very poor quality. You can see where it's peeling. It's very, very unusual for a plaque. And they worked here quite a bit with Robert Stigwood, of course. The building has been empty for some while. I checked it out. It's owned by a Qatari company. And I'm putting the wheels in motion to see whether we could replace that plaque. I don't think it's mendable to put different paint on there. I don't know. But it certainly needs a new one. It's certainly not in a great state. But then again, I don't think the building is either. So maybe they're not too worried about the building. I'm not too sure. I hope they are. So I'm working on that. I put the wheels in motion to try and get a new plaque up there.
And those are the doors they would have walked through. That's the how many people that Robert Stigwood, who else did he look after?
Who else? What did Stigwood look after?
Yeah.
I mean, various people. I don't know everyone he looked after. I don't know his management roster. But certainly, once you look after a major band, Epstein, once you look after the Beatles, Stigwood, when you look after the Bee Gees, everybody wants to be with you because they perceive you as being very, very successful and somebody with a finger on the trigger and on the pulse. So, yeah, very, very important that if somebody, if Epstein or Stigwood or anybody like that, you know, or Tree with Elton says yes, you think, right, I'm in with the big boys. And of course, there's great leverage because, you know, Brian Epstein or Stiggy could say, yeah, you can have the Beatles, yeah, you can have the Bee Gees, but you've also got to take my new guy as well, or this other person that's got a record out. And of course, they go, yeah, so it's good leverage for them, really.
Absolutely. Well, that was where we finished the first bit, which was always a joy. And the Bee Gees themselves, I mean, the biggest thing about the Bee Gees is it's all about the celebration of their music. And we always say that the Bee Gees music is the soundtrack to everybody's life, isn't it?
It is. I mean, and you know, and the songs are so popular. I remember watching with Robin, I think the first Despicable Me. I don't know why we watched it. And at the end, a Bee Gees song came on, and he said, "Oh, that's good. You know that." You know, amazing. Whereas if you and I were, you'd know that it was the film, and you'd be right across it. How much are we getting? But Robin, it just came as a surprise to him. Oh, they used one of our songs. You get so used to that, I guess. You get so used to being a Bee Gee. And there's another interesting side of Robin. He's a great mate. I loved him enormously. You know, you turn up and you go, I found an old airfield that nobody else has ever seen. Come on, let's go. Great, full of enthusiasm, you know, full of enthusiasm for songs, wanted to talk about the songs. Enthusiasm still for the Bee Gees, for touring, you know, even when he knew he probably couldn't, talking about an Australian tour, wanting to do it, that passion, you know, which was amazing in Robin. And yet there was a Bee Gee side to him, whereas if he missed the plane that you knew he wasn't going to catch because he was always going to be late for it, he'd jump up and down and shout he was never going to fly with that airline again. You go, what? You know, you knew you were going to be late. You didn't leave until they were calling the passengers in. You didn't leave home. But so there was a sort of another side to him like that as well. There's a sort of very, I think, protective. I always said as protective of him and the Bee Gees. And I think that came from, you know, the Beatles were always cool. You know, Lennon is a cool character. And somehow I always felt the Bee Gees wanted to be taken more seriously than maybe they sometimes were by some people. You know, if I were a psychologist and looking at that, I'd think that because they did that high voice thing and were sometimes parodied by the heebie-jeebies and things like that, I think in some ways that hurt Robin. And he go, no, hang on, we've got the biggest song catalogue in the world, or at least as big as the Beatles. You know, I think it is high to take us seriously because we are good. And he was right. You know, they were good and still are. I mean, they're great songs to stand up. So I think in his defense, he was trying to put a wall around the Bee Gees and say, no, come on, don't do that. You know, I am a Bee Gee, and therefore, you know, you must play ball, which is great. I mean, and yet very compliant. You know, we did Who Wants to Be a Millionaire together. And in the afternoon, I think we got up to $250,000, and we thought, no problem tonight, no problem. And they asked us some really stinky questions. We got to about 20 grand or something. But he was always good and always up for something like that. When we did the Tsunami single, and I phoned Cliff, and Cliff said, yeah, I'll do it. Phoned Robin, he said, of course I'll do it. And then Barry said, yeah, I'll do it as well. And then when I launched it, HMV Oxford Street, along came Robin to help with the launch. So he was very, very good like that. Very, very kind heart, very big heart. And, you know, just loved music, just loved doing what he was doing. And when I was doing all the interviews after he died, and I remember somebody saying, you know, oh, what would Robin say now? All this, you know, attraction, everybody talking about Robin. I say he'd be bloody annoyed because he still had more to do. He wanted to be down. He wanted to write another Titanic, another musical. He wanted to write more songs. He wanted to tour again. You know, some people, I suppose, are tired of like, you know what, I've done it all. I can't be bothered. Well, Robin wasn't like that. He, in his spirit, he wanted to get back out there and do more, I think.
Absolutely. And those people not familiar, and say extraordinary that some may not be, how would you summarize, what would you say was the mass appeal of the Bee Gees?
Songs. songs. Their songs were so strong, and their harmonies were so strong. There's a magic between siblings. It happened probably in the late 40s with the Beverly sisters in the UK, earlier with the Andrews sisters in the States. You get that, the Everlys, Don and Phil, which other two people sang like that together? Here, to an extent, the Brooks brothers. You know, siblings can sing well together, and the Bee Gees did just that. There's something in there, there's something that tells you what the other one is going to do, where you can hit three-part harmony just like that. There is a magic. And I think they had the different voices. You can itemize it, but in the end, it's the old-fashioned X factor of, like, who knows? I mean, Barry had a great voice, that very high voice. Robin had enormous pathos. Maurice was the glue that held them together, and the three of them together worked well, and all wrote great songs. I think the strength really was the songs. I mean, their songs were so powerful. The early ballad songs, not only ballad songs, but Beatlesque songs, you know, different songs. They weren't afraid to try new things. So many acts, you know, once they get on a roll or in a certain vein, whoever it is, however great the singer, whether it's a soul singer, they tend to sing in that vein. Whereas the Bee Gees did all sorts. They weren't afraid to experiment. Very, very different kind of songs, different kinds of productions, different harmonies, and some magical ones. I mean, the number of times I played Massachusetts with Robin, and as soon as you pick up the guitar and go, dun, 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 you can hear an audible gasp in the room, and you think, wow, to have written a song where the whole room gasps before you've even got to the vocal, that's fantastic.
Absolutely stunning. And what's great as well is with RJ, who's a singer-songwriter in his own right, and the son of Robin, is taking it to a new generation, the Bee Gees legacy, and he's singing the songs of Robin, his father, and also of his uncles as well with the Bee Gees, and also bringing his own hits. So he's bringing it to a new generation. And as we say, it is the music of the Bee Gees provides the soundtrack, I think, to every generation, doesn't it?
Absolutely, and it's a legacy that's passed on. If you look at the families, in Marty Wilde, Kim Wilde, Ricky, great producer, Ricky and Martin, Ricky and Marty both wrote. Marty wrote songs for other people. Kim had his, and now the granddaughter is on his new album with him and Kim. So very much in the family. Joe Brown the same, with his son Peter, plays with him on stage. Sam had hits in her own right. So yeah, there can be a legacy. Carole King and her daughter Louise Goffin, that I've worked with on Songwriting Week. So yeah, there is a difficulty though in if your parents have done something and had a string of hits, it's always going to be difficult living up to it. It's always difficult. I mean, you know, RJ, great writer, great singer, but you know, are you going to have this, or do you want the same amount of hits, you know, or do you just want to continue the legacy, or do you want to have hits the same? I think if you have that burning desire, then you start quite young. I mean, for me, you know, I wanted a guitar when I was 14. I've got to have a guitar. I've got to have a guitar. It's that desire to do it, not just do I want to do it. It's the old acting thing. Do I have to do it? You know, and you want to write, you want to make it, you want to have songs, you've got to have that passion, you know. And I think with a lot of people, they like to look after the legacy. They're very proud, of course, of what their parents have done, and their parents equally proud of what they're doing. So yeah, I think it's good to look after the legacy. And if you can dip in now and again and do a song here and there, or revitalize one like RJ's done with Juliet, or you know, to write the Titanic with Robin, then that's great. You know, it's I mean, for me, it was great to write a song with Robin and RJ for the final album. And you think, oh, that's nice. When you had a friendship with Robin, you know, to actually co-write a song for the final album, One Way Love, was lovely. You know, it's a nice sort of fitting thing for me, really.
Oh, wonderful. Well, Mike, it's been an absolute pleasure to see you as always. I say I walked for many miles, many hours around the streets of London. Every corner revealed a new treasure. We'll continue the journey, but for now, Mike Read, thank you so much for being my guest.
Pleasure. You know, I could do that again. I could go around areas of London or parts of the country and do exactly that. It was terrific fun. It was really great fun.
Great fun, and actually great fun having the journey with you. Thank you so much, Mike. Take care.
Pleasure.
Bye. So my great chum, Mike Read, accompany me round the streets of London. Let me take you by the hand, and I'll take you round the streets of London. And I'll tell you what, every corner, every inch of London, as Mike says, has a glorious tale to tell. But on behalf of KTT Legacy and Marion and GSI, thank you very much for joining us. Until next time, I've been Andrew Eborn with my special guest today, Mike Read. And coming up, we also have a special tour with RJ Gibb as well. Until next time, be good, be safe, and I'll see you then. Bye-bye.